Welcome to In the Black podcast, a mission to share powerful stories in hopes to inspire lives. This is a passion project brought to you by your host, Araceli and Shannon, where we will interview women who have made something beautiful from something so dark. In today's guest, we have Janice, and it is Shannon's actually lovely friend. So, Shannon, why don't you introduce her to us?
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Janice. Janice is one of the most powerful women that I have known personally in my life. As I was going through my domestic violence challenges, she has advocated for me and for my children. She has been in the courtroom with me. She has just been such a phenomenal influence on my own life and on my ability to overcome situations. And so I'm very, very grateful that you have chosen to be our guest today. Janice went through her own domestic violence journey several years ago, and she'll tell us about that. But she has used that experience to change the world around her. She now runs a group called Surviving Domestic Violence in Southwest Missouri. She's part of numerous different organizations that fight domestic violence in that area. And she's just a very powerful human being, and she has taken her pain and the things that she went through, and she has changed that into purpose and passion, and is now creating a better world around her. And so, Janice, I really appreciate you, and I would love to hear from you. Kind of just tell us your story, and we might interrupt with some questions here and there as you go along.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you. You're my hype person forever now. Um, Follow me forever. And you are one of the strongest women I know as well. I am very lucky in that my abuser's in prison. And that is a rare thing for us, is I don't have to worry about him for the rest of my life because he got 45 years in prison. But it doesn't always go out that way. We were really lucky with our situation, and a lot of times I believe it is because he also shot a man, and it was caught on video. I think a lot of times when it's just us, we don't get believed, and we rarely see them serve much time. But I met Greg when I was 19 years old. Now, I've had people ask, do you look back and see the red flags you missed? Well, yes, but nobody told me that there were red flags that I should be watching out for. And abusers are really good at being the right kind, the guy that comes in and sweeps you off your feet. They say all the right things. It's not like they show up and say they're going to abuse you. So it was about 7 years into our marriage before he ever hit me. And I did not think that anything before was abuse. Now, after leaving, of course, I could see other things that happened it was a very abusive relationship from the beginning. But
Can I stop you?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, go into that a little bit more in detail. Like, what were some of those red flags that you saw? And specifically, as a neurolinguistics programming, I would like to hear some of the words that he spoke to you, how that impacted your mental health, and some of the words that you ended up saying about yourself.
Right. So, I was 19, and he was older. He had been married before. I was inexperienced, and therefore I didn't know enough about the world. So I needed to rely on him. His word was the right way to go because he had more experience than I did. So it started with little things like that. If you're too young, you wouldn't understand. And then it turned into when I got pregnant with our oldest son. It was really important for him to have me stay at home because his mother was a stay-at-home mother. And therefore, I didn't need to be on checking accounts or anything like that because I didn't know how to manage money because I had never been on my own. Because I essentially went from being at home to being married and having a child within just a very short period of time. I was barely 20 when my oldest son was born. And all of that turned into this. It started off as, I want to support you. This is going to be great for our kid. Isn't this so wonderful? To You're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to do anything. You don't earn money anyway. So you don't need to go and buy clothes, or you don't need to go out with friends. If I did want to go do something and he was going to stay with the kids, he was babysitting our children. He definitely started putting me in that position of not having any contacts, not having any support. Whoops, did we lose Shannon? I think we lost her. Oh, there she is. I'm assuming we're editing a little bit here, so we lost you for a second.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant with our second child. And also things like, you're never going to get your body back. Nobody will want you like this. I would get maybe 2 months to get back to my pre-pregnancy size. I think I weigh more now than I did 9 months pregnant. I think the most I was ever allowed to weigh was like 140 pounds. So all of those little things of, well, you didn't go to college, so now you're not educated. You're young, you're stupid, you don't know how to do anything on your own. You're just, all of these little things that I look back on, I go, oh gosh, he was putting me into such a position. And on top of that, moving us out of state to where I didn't have any friends or family local. My parents lived 13 hours away. And he had alienated enough of my friends that I really didn't have any support system. I had one friend that hung on, and that was it. So all of those things I didn't see as abuse, because I pictured abuse was fist to face, not that. And I didn't see how bad the situation had come until it became the physical. And I didn't have the money to leave. And I didn't even have a phone. He started turning off the electricity and the water to the house, things like that. And I had no way of getting it back on because I didn't have a checking account. I didn't have a phone to call anybody for help. So that I didn't recognize as abuse. It was the fist to the face that I recognized as abuse.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so you married Greg, and then what happened from there?
So we had 3 kids, and it was after our third son was born. I just decided I didn't want to have any more kids. I was absolutely adamant this was going to be the last child we had. And it didn't seem like that big of a deal at first with him. But that made him mad. After our son was born, I had a really complicated delivery with him. Doctor ended up staying in the room with me because I almost died. And I woke up, and the doctor was sitting on the edge of the bed, and he was worried. The doctor was worried because Greg wouldn't stay. And then when Greg came back the next day, he was accusing me of having sex with my OBGYN that had just delivered our child. And I just remember thinking, like, are you crazy? Like, this is insanity. Where is this coming from? But it was an immediate anger. And it goes on for a little while where it was just these little passive aggressive things. Our son was about a year old when he first assaulted me, but it was like clear we weren't going to have any more kids. We had gone out to a concert with some friends. If you've ever gone to a bathroom at a concert, it takes a while. So it took a little while for us to go to the bathroom, my girlfriend and I, to go to the bathroom and come back. And when we got back, somehow that had turned into I was having sex with all the band members. And, get in the car. Our friends were with us. They drove, get in the car, get home. And I remember one of my friend, Holly, she said to me, "Are you going to be okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is just Greg." Because Greg, instead of yelling at me, would give me the silent treatment. There might be days where he might not talk to me, and I wouldn't know what the reason was. It would be a little slight. And then it would, I would beg and plead, "Please tell me what I've done wrong. What have I done to upset you?" And, eventually it would turn into this whole thing like, you don't love me because of this, that, and the other. He would put me in that position of feeling like I had done something that made him feel that I didn't care. This night, for whatever reason, I just didn't want to play this game anymore. I was tired. I was exhausted. And I just said, forget it. I'm going to go to bed. And I got upstairs. I went to bed. Thank God our kids weren't there. our kids were at his parents' house. And the next thing I knew, I was just laying in bed and I was going to ignore it. The next thing I knew, he had grabbed me by my feet and threw me into a wall and proceeded to beat me over the course of several hours. In my mind, I say 3 hours. I don't know exactly how long it was. It went on for a long time. I don't remember. At one point, he took my clothes. I don't remember exactly how that happened, but I knew that he thought if I was naked, I wouldn't run for help. I remember being thrown down the stairs and dragged back up by my feet. I remember when he was sitting on my chest and he had his knees, one knee on each shoulder, and was repeatedly hitting me. He tried to strangle me. And this is a little bit of, now we know a little bit more about strangulation, but when you're being strangled, it's not like in the movies. It is intense. And I remember grabbing at his arm, trying to scratch his arm away. That didn't work. And I just remember reaching forward and grabbing his face, and he dropped me. I'm sure there were a couple more hits after that, but ultimately ended up in the bathroom where he would turn the water on and hold my face under the water spout, pulling me out back and forth. And this goes on and on and on. And there were a couple of moments that will always stick with me where we think we hear all, people say I would never let that happen. I would fight back. I would do all these things. It doesn't work like that. I had begged, please go ahead and end it. I don't want to do this anymore. And he said, and he stopped. It was like just a light switched. And he said, I would never hurt you. You're the mother of my children. I love you. And I remember thinking, is this a mental snap? What is happening here? And I was just tired. And he said, he basically got up and he was like, we're done. And I didn't understand what that meant. And he asked me, he said, are you thirsty? Do you want something to drink? And I thought, okay, I better not say no. I better, whatever he says, I'm going to say yes to. And I said, yes. And he said, well, what do you want to drink? Do you want a Diet Coke? And I said, sure. He said, we're out of Diet Coke. And I thought, oh my God, okay. And I'm thinking, he's like, do you want to go get one? And I said, sure. Because I'm thinking if I can get out of my house at this point, I will agree to anything. Or if I can get him to leave the room at least, maybe I can find a way to get myself safe. And he said, okay. And he walked me back into our bedroom. And at some point in time, he had thrown me into a wall hard enough that I really couldn't move my arm. I wasn't sure if it was broken or dislocated or what had happened, but my arm wasn't working properly. And he looked at me and said, well, you can't go naked. And oh yes, you're right. I'm agreeing to whatever at this point. And I neglected to say at one point he had taken all the phones in the house and hidden them. So this was kind of a planned attack before he came in the room. There were no phones where there were normally phones. And so he went to get clothes out of the closet, and I had laid back on the bed because he was going to have to put my pants on. I didn't have a top at that point. And I remember feeling a phone on the back of my head, and I thought, oh God, okay. And I thought, this is my shot. If, I got to do something. And so I grabbed the phone and I shoved it in the back of my pants while he was grabbing my shirt. And I thought, if he finds that phone, I'm dead. I've got to do whatever I can for him to not find that phone. And he puts my top on me and he sits me up. He's like, okay, you can go. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is like, what is the sick, twisted joke that's about to happen? And to leave our house, our bedroom was on the second floor, and there was a flight of stairs, and the stairs ended right at the front door. Or there was a back door that I would have to run through the living room and go to the kitchen. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to run this way, and maybe I can grab a knife. And I think, well, no, I can't grab a knife because he's going to overpower me again. And then I'll end up dead. And maybe I can make it to a door or a window or something. And he's walking behind me the whole time. I still have a problem with people walking behind me down the flight of stairs right now, to this day, because I don't like it. Because I was thinking he's going to kick me down the stairs. This is what's going to happen. He opened the door and he let me out. And he looked at me. He said, you're not going to call the police, are you? And I said, no, of course not. Of course not. I just want to go get it. I love you. I was saying whatever it took to get out of that situation. And sure enough, he let me go. And I got in the car and I started it and I threw it in reverse out of the driveway. And I called my friend instead of calling 911 because I didn't know what to do. I was in such shock. And she said, "You've got to call police right now." So I did. They met me at a parking lot. And I told them what happened. And I was absolutely hysterical, which you will hear a lot of victims. We seem completely out of our minds when police show up. We have just been through a horrific trauma. We're trying to make sense of it. And it doesn't make sense. But police got there. They asked me what had happened. I told them, and they said, "Well, you want to follow us back to the house. We need to come back to the house with us and we'll go talk to him." And I thought, okay, because I mean, something's wrong. I think he needs an ambulance because obviously he's had a mental break or something. And they go and they say, "You stay in the road. Don't come up to the house." And okay. And they go and come back a few minutes later and they say, "Well, he's got a gun and he's sitting at the top of the stairs. And he's saying he's going to kill or shoot anyone who walks in the door." And I, "Oh, well, don't shoot him." I'm thinking he's having a mental break. Again, I'm still not processing that what I've experienced as abuse. And ultimately, he did open the door, and the officers talk to him, and they come out and they get me, and they say, "Do you want to come in?" He says, "Well, you were flirting with other men." And immediately my heart sunk. I knew, oh God, you're in trouble. And now earlier in the evening, my friends and I, we had gone to this concert and we had a few drinks at the house. Now, I was not a heavy drinker at the time.
1 second. On
What's
my
that?
recording part, you froze. So
Oh,
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat when he finally opened up the door and they said, "Do you want to come in?"
yeah. So officers, I come in the house and one of them looks at me and says, "So he says that you were flirting with other men." And I knew I'm in trouble. This isn't good. And earlier in the evening, before we went to the concert, and this had been hours before, the friends had come over to the house. We had a few drinks before we left. And Greg had lined up the empty alcohol bottles, and they were just sitting on the floor in a line. And I, they were asking if I had been drinking. Well, yes, but earlier, the thing that victims will do, we will be so honest and we will take on things that we shouldn't have to take on. Like, of course I was drinking. Yes, of course I hit him because, and I was fighting back. And yes, I scratched his arm and his face, but you don't understand. It's not because I was being aggressive. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't this, and this is, the training has gotten better for officers, but a lot of times a victim will say, "Yes, I hit him, but," or "Yes, I was drinking, but." And that has nothing to do with what has happened. We just feel like we have to be so honest about everything that we, will sometimes say a word that we don't mean. Like we'll say, "He choked me," instead of "She strangled me." Well, we choke on food. Somebody putting their hands around your throat and depriving you of oxygen is strangulation. But the officers, I could tell immediately. Greg was very calm. He's a very, like, everybody loves him. He walks in a room and he'll charm the room. He's a great salesman. And he was very calm and put together, and I was a sobbing mess. And he had scratched to his face, and my bruises hadn't showed up yet. They did make a note in my police report that I had the beginning of a black eye and some marks to my neck, but that he had scratches to his face. And the officer looked at me and said, "Well, we can't tell who the aggressor is. So we're going to take both of you in." Now, at the time, he was well over 200 pounds and pretty muscly, and I was barely 100 pounds. And we're thinking, "I'm a soccer mom. What are you guys doing? Like, are you crazy?" And it was just the surreal experience. And so get there, we're booked in. He's actually kept in the same area that I'm kept in. And the next morning, a friend comes over and she gets me out. No charges are filed against me. But it set the tone for every interaction I would have with him from there on, and for everything I would have with police. to where I was not going to call them. I would do whatever I could to not have to call them, because he would, and he did this again later on. He would hurt himself, and then he would claim that he had been assaulted, and it was, and I was scared to death. What if I get arrested again? What if, how am I don't want to lose my children. So it was a very quick way to silence me. And I think a lot of victims experience that, where we're scared to call the police because they'll say something, or they'll say, well, you did text me that you were going to kick my ass, or you did, you did hit me. I have a bruise. Or Greg went so far as to later on, he would punch himself before his victims would call police. And luckily, the last time he did that, the officer did catch I can't remember what hand it was, but he asked the victim, he said, "What, are you right or left-handed?" And she said, "I'm left-handed." And he said, "Well, that's impossible, Greg. You couldn't have punched yourself, or she couldn't have done that handed." And so anyway, but it's definitely a barrier that a lot of us face, is the fear of calling police, because we don't know what they're going to do when they show up.
So I'm curious, when you take a look at your life, living in that situation and living through the pain every single day and trying to find some sort of purpose and meaning, and what brought you out of that, and what made it to where you are making an impact in these women's lives now that you're helping to escape from domestic violence?
It's a lot of years. And I would get very upset if it was brought up. I've been remarried for almost 20 years now. And my husband now he was very supportive of me as a survivor, and didn't understand that I carried shame, because society pushes shame on us a lot. What did you do to invite this? How did you not see those red flags? I had my grandfather said, "Well, you had 3 kids with him. You should have thought about that before you got yourself into this situation." So society shames us into silence. And it really wasn't until I saw attacks on another victim that I thought, well, this has got it. I'm done. I don't want to, I'm not accepting this anymore. I'm not okay with this anymore. If you're going to blame her, you're going to blame me too. And I've been taking blame for years. So you're not going to hurt me anymore. And it was right after the shooting. And local news station reported that I was the one that was shot, and what caused chaos among a lot of different people. Everybody freaking out that night that that the shooting happened. It again, just the play brain, and how it all played out. It was surreal. But I see people saying in the comments about that victim, well, she was doing this. Well, she shouldn't have gone out with him. And I raged. And I messaged a local reporter. I said, "Do you want the real story about who this man is? Because I'll be damned if I watch him get out again." And so they let me do a story. And I said, this is a guy that has been dangerous for a long time. We have been trying to get people to pay attention to it. It is not her fault. You don't understand how it is for us when we have children with our abuser. We are not allowed to not be around them. We are required to be around them when we have children with them. And if we don't, we're seen as we're the bad one. And so that really forced me out there, and pushed for that change of we've got to quit blaming victims. We have to look at this guy. We can't ask her what she could have done better. We have to ask him why he thought this was okay. And so it wasn't really until it happened to somebody else that my rage hit and thought, well, we're not doing this anymore. And so that led me into, sharing my story, starting the page, and hearing other victims and realizing, oh my God, I'm not, my story isn't unique in any way. What is unique is I had family that supported me financially to get out. That I did have a friend that held on no matter what, and wouldn't let him alienate her from my life. And then ultimately what was unique is that Greg's crime was caught on video. And you really couldn't argue with what you saw on video. So all of that was unique to me, but my so common. And it's just, every time I hear a survivor share her story, it's like hearing my own story all over again. It's just a different person. A lot of us survivors will sometimes joke like, okay, are we married to the same guy? And because it is just so textbook. So that, and one of my friends that I met, we were talking about, what do we need to do to change? And Missouri didn't have lifetime protection orders at the time. You basically had to be reassaulted if you wanted to get an extension. So again, I think what fueled me on that was I had somebody with an advocacy group say, "You'll never get that done." And we said, "Oh, I think we will. If you tell us we can't do it, we're going to do it." And by God, we did it. And we bugged legislators until they answered our calls, and one took it up. And that poor man gave me his cell phone number, and I'm pretty sure he will never make that mistake again. But we got it passed. And we did some other things locally. We found out that they would charge victims for a copy of their police report. Well, it might not seem like much. $3 is $3. And why are we charging victims for copies of their crime reports? So we got the city of Springfield to get rid of that charge, so that any victim can go in and get a copy of their police report, their assault report for free. So it's everything has just kind of led into other things. And so I've been really lucky.
I wanted to kind of go back a little bit and ask, what was the turning point? Was it the shooting and then you finally were able to get out of that relationship? Or what was the turning point to allow you to get out of the relationship?
I in a very gallows humor. That's kind of, you'll see that with survivors a lot. We have a little bit of gallows humor about a lot of things. I joke that I got beaten bad enough the first time I didn't want to go back again. Not that he didn't assault me again. Numerous times after that, but I did not want to be married to him anymore after that. And I think had he played a little bit different game, that might have been a little different, but he so quickly did not go. There were sorries at some point, but he very quickly turned into the "you will do as I say," because he didn't know that I had family that would be able to step in financially and help me. So I was lucky in that, that I got a bad enough beating the first time and I want to go back again. And I had family that could support me financially, and made it so that I could hire an attorney. It still took me 3 years to get a divorce. Over $50,000 that I spent through the years trying to protect myself and my children from him. Um, it just got to the point where he would say we were the divorce that was separating out the forks, knives, and spoons. We would get to an agreement, and he would say, "Wait a minute, you remember that? You remember how I said that you could have this? I changed my mind," and we'd have to go back to the drawing board. And so after a couple of years, I said, "Fine, you know what? You want to play this game? Fine, I'll just drop the divorce right now, and we'll just say I'm not getting married to anybody else again, and I don't have any desire to be in a relationship." And so I dropped the divorce for a little bit. Then he did something else to a friend of mine, and I said, "Well, either you give me my divorce now, or she's probably going to report this. So why don't you let me get that divorce now?" And so finally, I was able to divorce him, let him have everything. He had the house, the cars, all of it. I just took the kids and started my own life. But I think that if a lot of people had that option and that support, they would get out pretty quick. I think that we see people go back not because they want to. There are some that they do. But a lot of times it's just we're trapped. We don't have a way out. So, we don't think that we're in a great relationship. We sometimes tell ourselves that, or we'll tell people that, like, "Oh no, it's not what you think. He's not that bad. It was just a bad night." But I think that if you gave us the financial resources to leave that day, I think that we'd see a lot of the stories change.
So after that night of that first assault, that was it. You just like never went back.
No, well, I wish you could escape that easy. No, I was required to, by court order, I was required to be around him. because we had our 3 children together. So I wasn't in a romantic relationship with him at that point. But I was required to see him one night a week and every other weekend.
So you didn't have to live with him, though.
I didn't have to live with him.
You got
No.
to get out. Okay, good.
I was able to, he was out of the house for a while, and then I was able to, I had an order of protection. There were some things in place, but then after a bit, I was able to get my own place. I had money and I had, the ability to go and get my own place, but I still had to let him know where I was. He broke into that house and assaulted me in my home. He would assault me again later on, but we were not in a romantic relationship after that night. Legally married for 3 more years, but not like what we think, not like a regular marriage.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. So now, to clarify a little bit, I guess, I think you may have said it, that it led you into, like, it grew a passion for you to, start advocating for other women in this. So where are you now and what are you doing with that?
So in my spare time, I'm a member of the Family Justice Center Voices Committee. And it's where we are survivors. It's a group of us as survivors, and we talk to people in the community. We're trying to reach the people in the community that maybe don't know that there are others like us out here. We want to know that we want other people to know that there is hope after you escape, that there is life after abuse. We want to talk to the people that are on the other side, our first responders, things like that, and explain to them, we know that we don't always make sense as victims. We don't always do what you think is the logical thing, but what a lot of times you don't understand is there is more going on. If we were to go from point A to where I am now, it would take us hours. And there are things that even sometimes I forget. My children remember assaults on me after I left that I have no recollection of. They'll say, like, God, Mom, don't you remember the time that Dad had the knife to your throat and he had you in a closet? No? What? And it's just because it was so much and it was so often. And that was after I had escaped. Things that even my grown children didn't tell me until their father was convicted, where he would put a gun to their head and tell them to never tell anybody what happened in his home. All of these things that, we're trying to reach those people to make them understand, abuse doesn't end when you leave. It actually can end. It gets worse when they can't control you in that daily setting. Well, now the ante is upped. People say, why do you go back? Well, we go back because we're being forced to send our children into a dangerous situation that we can't go in to help. And we will take the heat for being called all the names if it means protecting our children. I have several friends that have said, if he gets, if custody doesn't change, or if they decide this, I'm going to go and beg for him to forgive me, and I'm going to go back, because how else do we keep our children safe? We do all the things they tell us to do, and yet bad things still happen. And all we want is for nothing bad to happen to our children or for the abuse to end. And until we make it so that is something that's how you leave, that when we leave, we're safe. You're going to see us go back. You're going to see us do things that don't make sense to others on the outside because they assume that it's just a toxic relationship. I hate that term, toxic relationship, because it's often used to describe abusive relationships. Toxic relationship is when my husband brings home a pizza when I say I'm on a diet, things like that. Like that's often not what we're talking about when we talk about toxic relationships. We're usually talking about abusive relationships, and people get this idea that it's just two people that don't get along. Well, it's so much more than that. It's usually a victim that can get along really well, somebody that's making it possible for them to, be in a safe relationship with them because they want so much power and control over you.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about some of the things that surviving domestic violence in Southwest Missouri has seen, or some of the committees that you've been on, some of the changes that you've seen in your years of doing this? Because I know you came and you actually spoke in my court case, and that's just one small difference that you made. But you've done some pretty big things. You've been on some news outlets, different things like that. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, it is, gosh, I think about it and I'm like, so there's a lot of intersection with guns and abusers. And so I'm pretty vocal about that. Greg had legally purchased a gun before he was put on probation. And people will say, well, there's things in place. Abusers will find a way to get a gun if they want a gun. That's not really true. There's nobody that shows up at an abuser store and says, let us go through your house. We want to see how many guns you have. That doesn't happen. They're supposed to turn their guns over. Who are they going to turn them over to? And they don't ever really do that. But if they get caught with it, maybe they might face some charges. Now I know that there's some money filtering in to this area where federal prosecutors will be able to charge some of those charges, because before it was like, meh, that federal gun charge was more for like drug offenders, things like that, when they couldn't get you on other things or if they were trying to pile on things. So gun advocate, talking about securing guns, doing some changes around that has been a big passion of mine. And I've talked about that and its intersection and abuse. I was on the sexual assault task force with Springfield, where when the CNN report came out about all the backlogged rape kits, Springfield was one of those that was in the report. And, there was a lot of confusion as to what that meant, and how we were going to do that, how we were going to change that. A lot of people didn't realize when rape kits were created, they were just like, okay, here, it's a kit. And nobody rules on how to handle this with it. Now here in Springfield, we'll keep rape kits for 100 years. There are options for how they're, if you're going to report, if you're not going to report, if you want to report anonymously, and all of those things have different options available if that's what you select. Rape and domestic violence are all intertwined. We think of rape and we think of a stranger that bashes us over the head, that jumps out from behind a dumpster. We don't think about a woman not having the freedom to say no when she comes home, or, when she's assaulted after leaving. Those things often happen, but we think that if a victim knows they're rapist, that maybe it's not true. We see that in society a lot of, well, what did she do to invite that? Or, well, was it really? No. I mean, she did go out to dinner with him, which again is what we see a lot of victims do. Greg was kind of, that was his MO. Okay, I'm going to give you the divorce, but you have to go to dinner with me. Okay, I'm going to pay the child support, but you have to agree to do this. And you're in a situation where you don't really have a lot of options. So all of that has kind of led me into talking to different groups, or, some nationally. There's been stories that, I get involved in that. And because there is so much intersection with abuse and other issues within our society, drug addiction, people, you'll often see victims that are addicted. And, they're fearing reporting because, well, but I also did this. Whereas now here in Springfield, they won't, if let's say you have drugs in your system, but you've been assaulted, they're not going to arrest you for having drugs in your system if you've been assaulted. So there's been positive changes in having these conversations and just sitting down and saying, I need to hear your side of it, from a law enforcement side or from a nurse's side. What are you seeing? Let's talk about this and how can we fix it? So hopefully that kind of answers some of what you were thinking. I know Shannon knows so much about all that I've done that I'm like, okay, what is that?
Yeah, I love how involved you are in the community, and I love that you are always out there working to make an effort and make a change and educate people. And I remember going and watching you speak at a fraternity house where you were educating the guys to watch out for what their friends might be doing. And I think it's amazing that you're out there and you're really making a difference in the world. And something that I'd like to ask, um, those words that Greg said to you when you were married and the words that you carried with you, the painful ones, how did you change that recording in your head? Because you're one of the most powerful women that I know. And I know that you have spent years working on yourself and working on your own self-image and your self-worth. And tell us what that process looked like for you, and I don't know, some things that made a difference in how you feel about yourself.
Right. It's I think we're all taught some really bad messages, women, men, about what we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to behave, what we're supposed to look like, all of our lives. This is something we hear constantly, about you're supposed to be this size, you're supposed to look this way, you're supposed to behave this way, speak this way. Um, and I'm still learning it. I'm still, dealing with it. Good Lord, gaining weight has been one of the worst things in the world mentally to tackle. Just because in my mind, X size was fat because that's what he had taught me. That's what society had taught me. I remember one of the most empowering things did. You remember when I cut off all I
Yeah.
had hair as long as yours. And one day I was like, that's because it said that women with short hair were gross. And I'm like, I'm cutting off all my hair. And I loved it. It was very freeing. And it felt like it was just shedding this, because everybody always talked about my hair. Oh, your hair's so long. It's so pretty. It's so this. And I thought, I'm done. Let's see what this is like on the other side. And I had short hair forever. This is pretty short compared to what it used to be. But oh my gosh, I don't have time to go get a haircut that often. My hair grows stupid fast. Things like that. I don't color my hair anymore because why? What's wrong with having silver hair? And I think it's just over time, age, experience, realizing that there was something relevant to say, and I didn't have to look a certain way to say it. I think that has been a big change for me. I think it's important. We judge people so quickly by the way they look, just like we judge. We all have a picture of an abuser in our head, and I tell that to people when I speak. I'm like, we all have that picture of what an abuser looks like, and we don't picture a doctor or a successful attorney. We don't picture a pastor. We don't picture the guy that's volunteering, but often that's who it is. In our mind, I know I grew up with the idea that he had on the wife beater shirt with the tattoo on the shoulder that said mom, and the mullet and the cigarette and the can of beer and that is actually not who beat me. That's not the person who I was scared of. So just overcoming all of that and realizing that what you say matters. And I learned, gosh, and I always say that, when people say I'm the expert, I'm like, oh God, no. So are the experts, and listening to their stories, that teaches me so much, because I don't know what's right for your situation. I would never tell a survivor how to do it. I will tell you, this is what I did. And this is the result of it. I took a lot of big risk at times with my abuser, that most people would be like, don't do that. But I knew my situation better than anybody else. And so giving myself that permission to make a mistake. I mess up all the time. And, realizing that, nobody else, if I did what everybody else told me to do, I'd still be married to him. And, that what I thought mattered. And I think that's a good way to empower victims too, is a lot of times they don't need me to tell them what to do. They just need me to hear them and believe them and validate them. And because that's so hard to get, it's uncomfortable to talk about. I talk very openly about it. I'm such a buzzkill at parties, because will say, what do you do? And I'm like, well, do you want to talk about my insurance job, or do you want to talk about what I do in my spare time? And either way, that's really boring to hear about. So, or it's just not fun to talk about. But normalizing talking about it, like Shannon, you do the same thing. We just have these very open discussions, and we're not ashamed of it because we didn't do anything wrong. And that's another reason why I say, I don't care if you call me a victim. I don't care if you call me a survivor. Just don't ever call me an abuser, because that's the only word that holds shame. And, just those are the conversations that we need to be having. And even years later, this has kind of been my passion, is moving forward, as I want to talk about the years later. Everybody thinks, okay, good, you're done. He's in prison. Everything's hunky dory. And they don't realize that, well, no, we have children, and there's things like, I have a grandchild now. I can't post him on social media because I can't take a chance on my abuser ever getting a picture of that child. I don't even talk about what gender that child is, because we don't want him to know about it. And, weddings and life events, things like that, that we can't celebrate in the same way that other people get to celebrate, because we're survivors. And, we don't need that other person in our lives knowing what's going on. So those conversations are still needing to happen, because there are survivors out here, or victims out here, that are 20 years down the road, like, why am I still triggered by this? Aren't I over it yet? And we're not. I have a friend that her children didn't know about the abuse, and they wanted to have the wedding. One of the kids was getting married and wanted to have it at her home. And she had to allow her abuser into her home because she couldn't talk about it. And she had never disclosed it. And how do we navigate that situation? Because if she had said, absolutely not, your father's not allowed in my home, she would have looked like the bad guy, not not realizing, with the kids not realizing, this is what her story was. So all of this deal, the conversation needs to continue on.
Absolutely. I actually had to speak with my abuser today, and it still sends me into this spiral, fight or flight.
Absolutely.
And I hate feeling that he has that much control still. I got full custody of my kids in November, but we still have to speak about the kids.
Right.
And it's just crazy how much 11 years later that still impacts me.
It does. And, and that's another thing that I often tell victims. Like, I was just at the courthouse last week on Tuesday for another victim, and just sitting there supporting her, watching out for her. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this building still makes me want to throw up. Every time I see it, I still want to throw up when I walk in this building. And I thought to myself, like, I've got to remember, that's not a bad on me. My body remembers what it took to survive. And immediately, and it's almost like in an odd way, it's a reassurance of, like, my body still knows how to react when I'm in a dangerous situation, even if my mind is telling me something. So the body doesn't forget. So I tell victims, I'm like, hey, listen, I know you're sick. I know you're nervous. I know we get that cold, sweaty palms, and we are like, help us. We are dripping sweat. And it's not because we're weak. It's because our body is remembering what we are doing. We are facing somebody who's tried to kill us. And we are so strong that our mind is overpowering that natural instinct to run the other way. And that's what that feeling is. It's not weakness. It's not you not being over trauma. It's your body saying, oh no, we're in danger. And your mind saying, no, we're staying, and we're dealing with what we have to deal with, and we're doing what we have to do, even though every inch of our body wants to go the other way.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Araceli, do you have any more questions for her?
I don't think I do. I think we covered, the backstory, what kind of got you out of that situation, the turning point was, and then, how that kind of led to a passion and a purpose, and that, gave you that to help others. So yeah, do you have any other?
Yeah, one last question. Is there an organization or something that you could say to people who want to make a difference in this area? Like, what do you think the best thing is for them to do if they want to make an impact right now in regards to domestic violence?
Be aware of what your legislators are doing. That is a huge thing. If you want to volunteer with an organization, there are lots of local organizations that you can be a part of. But sometimes being an advocate for victims, like volunteering on phone lines, things like that, that can sometimes be triggering. What I wish more than anything would be that people would contact their state legislators, look at what the laws are in your area, understand what it takes sometimes to escape. 50-50 parenting, everybody talked so highly about it. And it's actually a tool that abusers use quite often to control us. Those things, make sure you're educating people around you about what the obstacles are for leaving. What was your story as a victim? Don't be afraid to share it. There's so many outlets that we can look at aside from just going to your local shelters, knowing the resources that are available, and know that if somebody does disclose to you, don't judge them. And you don't have to fix it for them. A lot of people feel like they have to fix the situation right now. And it is okay for you to be like, I don't know how to fix this, but call this person at this number, or I'll go with you and let's see what we can find out, because it really is a step-by-step process. There is no one answer to escaping abuse. There is no one thing that you can do. It is 1,000 little steps that we have to take in order to get to a place of safety. So, aside from all of that, just know what's going on in your area. And that is a huge impact on people around you. Being that person, don't look away. Don't, know what's happening in your community.
1 second, Shannon. Okay, go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Janice. I know the impact that you made in my life by being there for me and my kids is just incredible. And I'm only one person. I know that you have done that for so many people now. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate the impact that you're making on the world. And I'm excited to see the world change a little bit at a time because of what you're doing. So thank you.
No, thank you for doing this as well. And I love you, and I would take you in any day. So come back. So come visit. We'll see you soon.